Decision making. Sounds simple, right? We make thousands of decisions every day, and even when they are simple, so many inputs go in to make those decisions. When it comes to big decisions like making draft picks, signing free agents, and running a football team, not only do decisions come with big consequences, but they have massive financial implications as well. And since Neil and I are not experts in decision making, we got someone who was. Annie Duke, PhD in cognitive science, world champion poker player, and advocate for making good decisions, joins us to talk process, clarity, outcome bias, and so much more here on Scouting the League. Hey everyone, and welcome to Scouting the League. Really excited for the conversation with Annie Duke. Such a fascinating topic that I absolutely love. So many levels, so many layers to it, and it is so important in being successful. But before we jump in, let me remind you to go like, subscribe, and share this podcast wherever you are listening and watching. Whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, that video portion over on YouTube, make sure you're hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Most importantly, go share it with a friend. You love ball, you love decision making, go share it with somebody else who could maybe improve their decision making. Let them know about us, and then have them go back and listen to all our archives. Continue to support the podcast and comment wherever you can. Again, I am Rodrik David at Right Step ADV is where you can find me on X. RSAfootball.com is my website where you can check out everything I am doing as well as a little bit more about me. Neil Stratton, co-host, joins us as always inside the league on X. InsideTheLeague.com is his website, and he's also got a fantastic blog, SucceedInFootball.com. Make sure you go check him out. While you are out there checking stuff out, if you are a scout or aspiring scout, make sure you check out thescoutingcommunity.com for all resources you need. If you are a scout, if you need some help with taking care of some of those insurance ideas at home, making sure you have a full idea of what the salary landscape is across the NFL. If you're an aspiring scout, just want to network, ask questions, make sure you are set up for success when you get that first NFL job, join the scouting community. It is at thescoutingcommunity.com. Go check it out today. And then go get your new pair of insoles as well from BlueMaka.com. That's BLUMAKA.com. Fantastic conversation about a month ago with Stuart Jenkins, Chief Innovation Officer for Blue Maka. Use code SCOUTING20 when you make that purchase over at Blue Maka with those insoles that will make a difference as soon as you put them in your shoes, whether it's training, whether it's your everyday shoe, slip them in there and you will notice a difference. That's BlueMaka.com. Use code SCOUTING20. Really fun conversation with Drew Fabiniash, new director of the Senior Bowl. Top 300 list just came out. Make sure you go check that one out. We also had cut downs yesterday. A tough time for NFL teams, front offices. I hit on that last week as well. Not only the process, but what it means and how teams get down to that 53. We finally have regular season football coming up, starting, college season kicking off. So it is a great time to be a football fan. As we continue to roll through guests, topics, conversations on Scouting the League, we will bring you a little bit of everything. Anything you want, anything you need, anything you are curious about, let us know. Neil and I both on X, so go find us, comment, let us know what you want to hear. But enough from me. Let's get today's conversation with Annie Duke. Well, Annie Duke, welcome to Scouting the League.
Thank you for having me.
It is fun. This is one, I think we've had this one scheduled for a couple weeks. I've been really looking forward to this. If you're a football fan out there listening and you're like, who is Annie Duke? Annie is, somebody that I've known about for, maybe, not to date anybody, but 20 years ago, World Series of Poker. If you're a poker fan, if you are a poker fan.
When I was playing poker at 5 years old.
Yes. I was, again, I grew up playing poker. Me and my friends really enjoyed it. World Series, again, that was early 2000s. The World Series of Poker got really big on ESPN. Everything was televised, was really a fun time for it. So I got to see you on there. And then is I've been talking to front office people and kind of going through the draft, and we're seeing this whole switch and a big push into the kind of what we'll call the objective decision making, the psychology of the draft. Two different people brought up your name and your book, and it was like, hey, perfect time to get Annie on. And so reached out, and here we are now. So why don't you tell our listeners, our mostly football crowd, kind of who you are, your background, your poker history, and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I started off kind of what I consider my adult life at the University of Pennsylvania. I was in the PhD program there, getting my degree in cognitive science, which is just broadly, there's like the world, but we don't really have access as beings to objectively what's in the world. Like we experience the world, we model it. And that's really what we're doing. So we're sort of creating some sort of model of the world. And like a simple way to sort of explain what I mean by that is that leaves aren't green. They reflect light of a certain wavelength that we as human beings perceive as green. And you can kind of like know that because some people are colorblind. Right. And so they don't actually see it as that color. So that's true of like a whole lot of things where we sort of think that we're experiencing the world objectively, but it's actually we're modeling the world. And it's just interesting to study like how do we model the world? Like what are the errors that we make? How do we get it right? Like how has that evolved? Like those kinds of questions. So that's generally what I was doing my PhD work in. I was at UPenn for 5 years and was actually out on the job market when I had been suffering from like some chronic health issues that became pretty acute and I needed to take time off. And so at that point, I took myself off the job market and I was just planning to sort of wait until the next year to go back out on the job market. But I had been going to school on a fellowship and found myself with no money. So I came from a single income family. Dad was a school teacher. So, we weren't rolling in it.
Yeah, not a big
like, oh, sure, take as much time off as you want. Well, I needed money. So I actually started playing poker to make some money in the meantime. A few things about that to kind of understand. This was in the 90s. So you just talked about, all of a sudden poker was on television. That was happening in the early 2000s. Prior to that, people didn't even know that poker was something that you could do as a living. They kind of thought it as gambling or, kind of in the same category as like being a drug dealer or, things that were advice.
Yeah.
So very weird thing for me to be doing, which may lead you to ask the question like, well, wait, how did this graduate student end up playing poker? My brother had already been playing for 10 years. So my brother's Howard Lederer. He's a world champion poker player, really excellent at games. And I had, in college, I would sometimes watch him play. And then when I was in graduate school, he would fly me out once a year for the World Series of Poker, which just at that time, just so you know, like only had like 300 people in it.
Oh, wow.
Because nobody knew about poker at the time.
That's the big difference in what we know today.
Right. Where there's like 6,000 people or 8,000 people in it. So, so he would fly me out. It was like, I was a poor graduate student who would fly me out once a year to Vegas. And Vegas is kind of boring if you don't know how to do something. And I didn't really want to like do the actual gambling game. So I had watched enough poker and he gave me some hints. And so I had sort of played poker a tiny bit. But he's the one who said to me when I was taking time off, well, why don't you try playing some poker and, maybe you can make some money in the meantime. And so I did that and I started making a lot of money in the meantime. And I really loved the game and felt good to me. I think partly because when I was growing up, we played a lot of cards. So it had sort of a familiarity to me. Felt like home at a time when I wasn't feeling well and I was kind of sick. So, so the meantime turned into a really long time.
Yeah.
In fact, 18 years I played professional poker.
Yeah.
And I lived through the time when, for the 90s and very early part of the 2000s. If you told, when I would tell people I was a poker player, they would ask if I went to Gamblers Anonymous, which was normally where the conversation went. I mean, people just really didn't understand it. Um, through like when all of a sudden it exploded all over television, and just very much by accident, I became kind of well known because I was odd, right? Like 3% of the people who play poker are 3 to 5% are women. And I was a world champion at it. So,
Yeah.
and other odd things like I had 4 children, and I was just kind of an anomaly. So I think
Yeah. The
kind of
unicorn. Again, it's a compliment when when NFL guys get called unicorns. I mean, that's a good thing. And you were a unicorn among the poker aficionados, the poker crowd. And again, it's the poker is not gambling the way, again, you sit down at a blackjack table, you can sit there for a half hour, get up, and again, you've played blackjack or roulette or whatever. And it's, times I've been to Vegas, people know that I enjoy poker. It's like, oh, you're going to go sit down and play poker. I'm like, I don't really have 6 or 7 hours to just go sit down, get involved in a game. Because again, that was the kind of time commitment. Again, it's not just sitting down gambling. Again, there's so much more to it. And again, it's the if fantasy football is blackjack, then poker and again Texas Hold'em, which is what I know, and again what got wildly popular, that's the draft, that's the lead up, because again you start taking in all these different factors that we'll talk about on here, and again the thousands upon thousands of small decisions you can make with every hand, with every prospect, which is where again it becomes really, really fun when you start getting up over the top of, again, not only poker games, cards, hands, watching it all, but again obviously the draft, which is what we're really involved in and what we talk about all the time. And so you play poker for a while, and then what?
Well, and then I did something that most people don't know about because it wasn't on television, right? So now it's the 2000s, and I'm just like, I'm on television. So when poker got on television, I think like for a lot of reasons, a lot because like I was this an anomaly, like I was a woman in a man's world, and I think in some ways I was like a safe choice for like a corporate to like hire. I started getting asked to do talks very often in finance about how poker might inform their thinking about like risk and sort of decision making. And that the first one that I gave was actually in 2002. And it was kind of like in that moment that I sort of realized like I'd been playing poker the whole time, and I think implicitly I understood this, but explicitly I hadn't really thought about what the relationship between cognitive science and poker as a decision making problem was. And I kind of realized like, oh well, I was studying like learning under conditions of uncertainty, and actually that's sort of what I've been doing. Like I sort of realized I had been doing the same thing as in a just sort of in a different form. So when I got asked to start giving these talks, that was when I was like, oh wait, this is like a really. My dog has joined the conversation. By the way, he will settle down, but he has to make a nest.
Yeah.
We're very dog friendly. We'll take any unpaid guests that we can get in.
Well, you know how they do that? They're like, wait, I've got to make my bed.
Yeah,
he's working on that right now. He's kind of a hilarious dog. Otis, are you done yet? Oops, wait.
No.
He's almost done. Are you done? He's just like. It's like almost. Sorry about that. Anyway, so when I started getting asked to do those talks, I think that I was like, oh wait a minute, like these two disciplines, like what I had been studying in graduate school and poker, are actually very interrelated, and what each can inform the other. So I started actually thinking pretty intentionally and deeply about how poker as a decision-making problem could inform all this amazing science that had been done in sort of the area of judgment and decision making, particularly sort of regionally by Daniel Kahneman, Amos Tversky, Richard Thaler, among others. where they were actually really thinking deeply about biases in our decision making. And I started thinking about that, and also how poker might inform some interesting solutions that could help you to actually get to something that was closer to rational. So for 10 years, I was playing poker and also doing that thing. And what I started finding over the course of that decade was that I was enjoying that other thing more. Partly, I think, because the stuff that I was doing with businesses was positive sum or win-win, and poker is very much a win-lose proposition. So for me to do well, I must take your money and make you sad. That is the only thing that could occur for me to be happy. Whereas the work that I was doing with businesses, for me to do well, they had to do well also.
Right.
And I think that I actually just really kind of enjoyed that. And I just found myself gravitating toward that, and then spending more of my poker time just specifically on televised events, just to sort of maintain brand. So anyway, through that process, I had this idea that there were two books that I wanted to write that were like mirror images of each other. The first thing was I wanted to write a poker book that was actually through this kind of decision making cognitive science lens. And I did do that. It was called Decide to Play Great Poker. You should only read it if you actually want to know how to play poker. Like, don't read it for any other reason. But then I always wanted to write this other book, which was thinking about biases and decision making and sort of the cognitive science world through this poker lens. And I really wanted to do that. So anyway, in 2012, I retired from poker. 2016, I sold the idea for that book. 2018, it was published. And that was my first general audience book called Thinking in Bets. And so that all just sort of came full circle. Like, I felt like this conversation that I was having about the relationship between these two things kind of came to fruition. And then I followed that with another book, How to Decide. And then my most recent book, Quit. And then now I'm under contract for another book. And then last year, 2 years ago, I finished my PhD. All right. So I tied up all the bows. I came full circle and came back to where I was. And yeah, so it's kind of a crazy, weird path. And it seems like it's very sort of jumping from one thing to another, except that what I tell people is, like, the only thing I've ever thought about from the time that I got to graduate school was decision making under uncertainty. How do you make good decisions when you have very little information in comparison to all there is to be known, because you're not omniscient, and when there's luck involved? Like, you don't have a time machine, you can't see the future, and so you're looking at some range of outcomes or a distribution of outcomes, and you're trying to figure out how to navigate the best decision under those circumstances. It's a really hard problem, and you can spend your lifetime thinking about it. And so far I have. So I feel like I've never done anything else. It's just been sort of like wearing different clothes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, that idea of, again, we're going to focus on the Thinking in Bets one. Again, it's you talked about it with Les Snead, GM of the Los Angeles Rams. Again, the Rams were the most recent winners of the Best Draft Award, awarded by Neil and Inside the League. And again, his philosophy, his way of doing things, of kind of stepping back from some of that subjective decision making, that, again, we're going to really put stuff on our scouts, who, again, we would all acknowledge that we have our biases and we try to get through those. But again, no matter how much you acknowledge them, no matter how much you know they're there, they're still there. So again, trying to step back from that and objectively make decisions with as objective as information as we can have. The more information for NFL scouts, for NFL front offices, it is as much possible information, as many data inputs in here from a truly objective spot is going to help us make the best decisions. Forget the outcome, because again, that is, especially when you're talking about human beings, the human factor is always going to affect it on the other end. But all we can do is make the best decision with the best information we have now. With Thinking in Bets, was that ever, again, applied to poker, applied through that lens that you've come up in, but again, can be really applied to almost any decision you make in everyday life, much less big decisions that NFL GMs, front offices, and anybody really anywhere has to go about. So talk about that idea of when I'm making my decisions, no matter how big or small, thinking in bets, breaking it down to try to make, again, the best decision I can.
Yeah, so it does apply to pretty much any type of decision that you would ever make. And I open the book actually with a football example that ends up getting carried through the whole book because I think it's such a powerful example. So the idea of thinking in bets is that, look, when we make decisions, there's two issues, which I alluded to before. The first is that we know very little in comparison to all there is to be known. We're just missing a lot of facts, So you could think about, for example, in the draft situation, you don't exactly know what other teams are thinking, who they're planning to draft, what positions they really feel a need to fill. Now you can make some guesses at it. Right. And a lot of the skill comes in being able to narrow down that world of possibilities, for example, of what the opposition is thinking and wanting, because it matters for your own decision making. But you can't know for sure. There's just a lot of stuff that you don't know. And because we have such limited information when we're making decisions, it means that we have like a lot of beliefs that are inaccurate in some way, fully inaccurate, like just wrong, or like somewhat inaccurate, right? And that's going to inform the decisions that you're making. So that's kind of problem number one, is that we just have this limited information. So if we apply it to the poker problem, I don't know what cards you're holding because they're face down on the table. So that's very hard to make sort of decisions under those circumstances when, now, am I going to be better at coming up with like a narrower range of hands that you could possibly have than an amateur? Sure. Right. But it doesn't mean that I get to perfect information. I can't. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is, even if I did have all the facts, there's luck, right? Even if I knew everything, we think about it in poker terms, there's the random deal of the cards.
Right.
That just is, right? Like, here's just simply in the draft circumstances, it's random, there's a random draw in terms of what position you're in. It's obviously related to how you did the previous season, but like where you end up, like that's not so much in your control, right? Like, and then other teams are trading.
Yep.
Right? Draft pick. Like, so where you end up in the order and who's going before you and all that stuff, like there's all the stuff that you just don't control. And then you can think about, like, you could draft somebody and then the first play of the season, they could tear an ACL. Like, literally, you have that's just luck, man. Like, you have no control over that, right? Like, and that's just that random deal of the cards, right? So that's kind of what the book is premised on. And what I'm saying in the book is, look, when you're making decisions, what you're trying to do is, given these circumstances that you happen to be living in, right? I'm not omniscient. I don't have a time machine. There's luck and hidden information. That I have some limited set of resources, time, attention, money, draft pick, right? That I have to invest in an option, some option that I choose. That option is not deterministic. It doesn't have a single outcome that's associated with it. There's some range of outcomes that are associated with it. Each of those has some chance of occurring. It's probabilistic in nature. And what you're trying to do is, given the resources that you have and whatever your risk tolerance is, you're trying to choose the option that on average is going to get you to the best outcome. And you're trying to do that over and over and over again. And what you have to get really comfortable with under these circumstances is that, at least in the short run, the outcome doesn't give you very much information. And I think that that's really hard for people, right? Like when you pick somebody in the draft and they turn out to be a dud, it's really hard for people not to go back and say, well, you made a bad draft choice. And it's like, but I don't know if you did that. Did you like put people's names in a hat and just randomly pick them? sure, then I would agree that's probably a bad process for picking somebody in the draft. But I have to see the work. I have to know, did you go through this process? Did you think about like what are the holes in the game? How are people going to fit into the scheme that we have, right? A good draft pick for one team might be a bad draft pick for another team just because of the scheme, right? Like you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you have to think about that. And then what do I think the lifetime of this player is going to be? What is medical saying about how injury prone they might be? Am I willing to take that risk for what I think the upside for that player might be? So on and so forth, right? Like there's, if you're actually thinking through all of that stuff and sort of mapping out like what those different, that range of outcomes look like, then I'm probably going to say that you made a good decision no matter how it turns out.
Right.
But I think it's very, very hard for people to kind of get their mind around it. And like one of the simplest examples I think about that is like when, have you ever noticed like people are ordering off a menu and they've got like a couple things that they're trying to choose between and they're just like in agony about it. And then like, whatever, it's a chicken or a fish dish. And then they order like the chicken and it comes back and it's not good and they go, I made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
What a terrible decision. Like, what do you mean? Like you couldn't travel forward in time and know that it was bad. Like you looked at the menu, like you asked the waiter, you didn't have any control over how this food was going to turn out. Why on earth is that a mistake? But I think it's very hard for people not to think that way.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm sort of trying to undo, because you have to undo that in poker. I lose lots of hands that I play great. I win lots of hands that I play terrible. And what I have to get down to is the process so that on average, I'm making better decisions than my opponents, because then over time I will win.
So Annie, there are teams that all I agree with everything you said. There are a lot of times you make the right decision and it doesn't go well for you. But we can still look at some teams that, generally speaking, draft better than others. What can we say empirically about what they're doing differently from others because they're having that success? Generally speaking, obviously. There's obviously oddities, but what kind of conclusions can we draw about those teams that are having success?
Yeah, so again, as I said, like you could make a bad decision and get a bad outcome. That's one of the things that could occur. And then as we start to see over lots and lots and lots of different draft picks, then we can say something about that set, right? So like this is like one coin flip versus 1,000 coin flips. Like 1,000 coin flips, I can say something about the coin. One coin flip, I can't, unless I can go back and look at the decision process. So what is it that the best teams are doing is they're actually kind of going through what I sort of just outlined a little bit, right? Like what are the things that you ought to care about, right? You need to think about, you have to have some sort of forecast of what you think the productivity of that player is going to be. You have to think about what your needs are as a team, right? And that has to do with expected value, right? Like look, everything is supposed to increase your win probability. That's what you're trying to do. And so the best, a great quarterback might be available that has some range of skills, that are available to them. But if you already have two great quarterbacks, if you're in a Joe Montana, Steve Young situation, that's probably not a great choice for you, right? But it might be a great choice for another team. So are you thinking about the player in isolation? Are you thinking about the player in terms of your own team, right? And how is that going to fill in and increase the win probability for your team? What does their upside look like? What is the distribution of outcomes that you think there is for that player, right? So there's going to be some times that you might want to choose like a distribution that's not too volatile. And there's some positions where you would want to do that for, right? And there's other positions where you'd actually want the volatility. You'd want someone who has like this tremendous upside, but maybe they're going to stink, right? And it's going to be different, like position by position. It's also going to be different depending on the composition of your own team, how much you're willing to sort of take like a smaller probability of this really outsized outcome versus someone who is going to be better than average kind of most of the time, right? And those are two different types of distributions. And sometimes we'd want one and sometimes we want the other. The question is, are you being like thoughtful about this stuff? That's really what's going to make a good draft process, right? Is that you're making real forecasts based on data that you're interpreting properly that are going to inform the forecast. You're going to understand that in the end, though, those forecasts are still subjective.
Right.
Right? Like that's really important to understand, is that you're looking at the data. You still have to interpret the data. You still have to model the data. Different people on your staff could look at that same data and come up with a different forecast, and that's okay. You have to have a process for kind of interpolating among those different forecasts that people are making. But as long as you're actually mapping that out well, and you're understanding all of that stuff, and then you're taking into account things like, for example, like, Richard Thaler has done great work on this. How much does it really matter if I'm first in the first round or second in the first round or third in the first round? Like, what's the actual increase in win probability or just expected value for the player from, and that is going to inform like whether you're trading up or trading down. If you're really being thoughtful about the predictions of when certain players are going to go in the draft, so that you can understand if you really need to fill in a gap, like, is it worth it for you to trade something in order to move up? Those kinds of questions. Like all of that stuff generally is going to inform a good process.
Yeah. Yeah, that expected value. I'm glad that you kind of use that term, because that expected value is something that's becoming more, and I would say more and more prevalent, more and more part of the thinking. Because again,
right.
The NFL and sports in general, it's all outcome driven, which is the
Right.
way it's viewed by the outside. Again, head coach can be really smart, really, really great with rooms. Guys love him. The GM, awesome, whatever. But again, if you don't win games, if the players don't pan out, again, it's all income driven. Again, you could say there's hundreds of bad luck situations. Again, usually it irons itself out. Make good decisions. Usually good things will follow. But with that, the valuation of the pick, again, that's becoming more and more part of where you're valuing the player, what they're going to bring to the offense or defense, what they're what it looks like from a medical standpoint. You're putting values on all these different areas to help you make decisions. And it's been hard in the past. There's this whole new thing called AI, and the massive amounts of information you can start plugging in there, to where these mini judgments that we're making between, you start with 1,000 players and you take it down to 10 and you take it down to 2. Again, the amount of information that AI can help make some of these decisions with the cognitive science, with some of this process driven thinking, trying to take that income or the outcome bias out of it. Are you seeing like, AI could really help make people make better decisions? Or is it that other piece of it where AI is going to make people incredibly reliant on AI, because people are just going to completely lose the ability to make decisions?
So, like, I hate to sort of like make any declarations about AI. Here are the things that concern me. I think that there's a lot of promise of AI to be another player in the decision making. I think it would be really bad if someone was allowing AI to make the decision.
Right.
And I'll just tell you, like, because here are the things that concern me. Any of these large language models are still engagement machines. Okay, so when we think about when you're on Instagram or whatever your social media is, TikTok, like, X, Blue Sky, whatever, YouTube, they're trying to get you to be on there longer, right? And so the way that is working is by showing you things that you like and that engage you so that you will keep using it. And LLMs aren't any different than that. So you could ask an LLM, let's say that you're using some LLM like Claude or whatever, right? And Neil is as well. Okay, so you both have a history with whatever it is, and it kind of knows you and so on and so forth. You could ask it the exact same question and get different answers. because it's still trying to please you. It's trying to make you happy. It's
Hmm.
trying to give you that dopamine hit, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that concerns me. So I think that one thing that people don't think about, and what's interesting is that it's actually something that I think deeply about, separate and apart from AI, is how are you prompting the AI,
Hmm.
right? So like you should have pre-written prompts that are in a certain order, that are doing things like it's always going to be written the same way with the exact same words when I prompt it. And then there's going to be a series of prompts that are coming after that that is asking it to disprove itself, to be skeptical, all of these things, right? So to actually start to structure the way that you're prompting it. And if you're not doing that, it's going to try to engage you. In other words, it's going to mirror your biases back to you. Um, and that's, I think, the thing that concerns me, because I don't think that there's a lot of focus on that. Now, one of the reasons why it really concerns me is that in general decision making, I don't think there's enough focus on that. So when I'm doing work, whether it's in finance or, by the way, with sports teams, and we're thinking about things like draft decision making or investing in a company, exact same decision, right? When you draft a player, you're making an investment. When you invest in a company, you're making an investment, right? So same thing. When I come into firms, I'm actually creating a lot more structure around the decision making, right? So I'm asking them to uh, quantify their opinions about the same things over. So a company comes in, they're answering questions about the exact same things every single time. It's incredibly structured, and it's for the same reason that I'm concerned about the way that people interact with AIs. And and I think some of the result is the same, right? When I go into a group and the discussion is unstructured and the feedback from the group is unstructured, I think we come out with like a lot of confidence that we all like had a great discussion and we gave our point of views and we debiased each other and all of this stuff. And it's not true. You probably amplified a lot of the errors that were going to occur. And that's my concern with AI, is that when you're interacting with an AI and you're doing it somewhat freeform, we just sort of think about the AI as like an objective, like not human. It's just going to tell us the truth and like give us the facts. And so I think we come away a lot more confident with what the AI is telling us than we ought to be if we're not actually structuring the way that we're interacting with it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that structure again from an NFL standpoint, again talking about the draft, again you're talking 15 reports, you're talking scouts from across, you've got multiple data sets, you've got input from years, you've got your historical data. Again, teams are dumping all that data in. I would say again, the good ones have a good process, good structure for it. And again, you take it up to the finish line. Again, always thinking about taking that outcome bias. Again, you're leading up to the draft and you pull the card to say a player's name that you, like you said, you're going to invest in that player, the person off the field. Again, every part of that person is part of it. So as teams think about these models, as teams think about, hey, we're going to add, again, as we've talked about on this podcast, an AI scout. That scout that is going to, all this model is going to do is basically take all our historical data, compile everything we have from this year, from our 8, 9, 10 different people that evaluated it, stick it in here, and it's going to give us a percentage, a hit percentage, likely success percentage. What does it look like when a team is doing it right, trying to just get to that point to, again, we feel really good about it. The language model feels really good about it. High hit percentage, high floor, if you want to call it a high floor, or high hit rate. What are teams doing right to get to that point?
So there's a few things. Like let's imagine that you have somebody, not an AI, but like a person who is giving the prospects, say, a character score, right? Or we could think about trying to make some forecasts of how injury prone the person might be, right? Like on average, how many years into their first contract are they going to make it, right? Or what's the probability that they remain uninjured? Or on average, how many games per season do you think that they'll be eligible for, right? Like those kinds of questions, right? That are going to go into it. What I want to see is that we're not just sort of talking about like character, but we're saying when we talk about character, what exactly do we mean? Right? Like what are the component parts of that so that we're all on the same page about what we care about?
Clean
What the definition of
definitions.
that is. Same thing with like, if we're going to make these forecasts about, someone being injury prone, I want to think about, well, what are the component parts that I'm supposed to look at in order to make that judgment and then break it down. So let me just take it out of football for a second so that I can maybe try to paint a picture here. So let's imagine that we are investing in a company. Let's imagine that we're now venture capitalists and we're investing in a company, right? We could all just say, whoa, I really like that founder. But like, I don't really know what that means. Like, what does like mean? What are the things that you like about that founder? Do we have the same idea of what makes a good founder? Like, I don't know any of that stuff if we're just having a free form conversation. And the problem is that we think we all share the definition. We think we're all rating the same thing, but we're not, because first of all, we probably don't have the same definition. And second of all, even if we did, if you're biased toward liking them, you're going to highlight the stuff that's good and low light the stuff that's bad in a way that, right, that I might do the opposite if I'm inclined against or whatever. So what I do with my clients is say, okay, I understand that you want to be able to say something about the founder, right? We need to create a shared definition of what the features of a founder are that you think are important. Right. So we figure out what those things are, right? It might be like, a sole focus on the problem at hand, right? Or something, whatever. We can figure out what those things are. So let's imagine we come up with 7 of those things, or we're trying to rate the market that it's going to be in. And we want to know what the competitive landscape looks like, right? And so that's now a component of it. So let's say we come up with like, here's 7 signals that we care about, right? Now let's imagine that we're saying like we care about like the product that they're selling, the founder, the team that they've built, the market that they're playing in. And now for market, we've got like these 7 signals that we care about. For founder, we've maybe got 7 signals. For product, we've got the same thing, so on and so forth, right? So now before we have a discussion about that company, after that company's pitched, we would all go to this structured feedback form, right? So now we know there's no doubt about what we mean when we say a good or bad founder, or a founder we like, a founder we don't like, because the definition is contained therein. You're not allowed to highlight or lowlight anything, because you actually have to rate all of the things, even the things that are kind of bad.
Right.
And I'm not going to let you use mushy words. Like, oh, I think they're great, top tier, average. Like, I don't know what those things mean. Instead, I'm going to make you tell me on a scale of, say, 0 to 7,
right,
how strong they are in that category. So we're going to quantify that, right?
Right.
What that allows us to do, and this is what I would recommend when we're bringing an AI in, right, is that it allows us now, first of all, to quantify your qualitative opinions, to make sure we're on the same definition of any of these things, right? That I'm seeing what you think about all of it, and not just the stuff that helps you tell your story. And because we've quantified it, I can now see where we differ.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing I think that people really miss, is that I don't really care very much where we agree. It's important to know that we do.
Right.
Right. That's good.
Yes.
But I don't need to have a big discussion about it. Like, great, we agree.
Yeah.
What I care about is where you think that the founder is a 6 and I think there are 3. Right. Where one scout thinks that the person's, that the prospect is a 6 in whatever feature it is that they're rating, and another scout thinks they're a 4, or the AI gives them a different score than the scout does, or the scouts generally agree and the AI is different. I don't care how it is. I just want to know where this dispersion is occurring, because then you can have a conversation about it. And frankly, you can have a conversation with the AI. You can say, hey, what if you had to rate this person a 6? What if you knew that was the real rating? Why do you think that they would be that, right? And then the AI now has to sort of argue against itself, and you can see sort of what that feels like and explore that.
Yeah.
And that's what actually allows you to get to a better place in the decision in the moment. But then when we think about the resulting problem, right, this like outcome bias issue, I've now, every single time that you're scoring somebody who's going to be in the draft, I can now look at what you scored them. And this is going to be over both people that we do actually draft and people that we don't.
Yeah.
And for each of those people, we're going to know what their productivity in different categories is over their careers. And now I can look and I can say, as I look at those opinions that you gave, how predictive is that across the set of people that you rated of how well they did? Yeah. Obviously, taking into account, well, they might be in a different scheme or something like that. But, generally that's going to come out in the wash across the set of people that you actually make these ratings about. And then we can get away from this outcome bias problem, because I don't really care if one person doesn't work out. I care if you have predictive power across the set. That's what I care about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, again, go ahead, Neil.
Annie, is it fair to say that the key to success, generally speaking, is have a rigorous process on the front end and then have a incredibly honest self-evaluation process on the back end to make sure that because you're gonna hit and you're gonna miss. But if you over time have a rigorous process and a way of evaluating yourself on the back end, more often than not, that's going to create a system of success. Fair to say?
That is the only thing that the science tells us will help, actually.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that the rigorous evaluation process on the back end, the ability to close those feedback loops, and the great thing is that in football, you can do it pretty quickly, right? Because like the draft happens and then the person has a rookie year, right? Mm-hmm. And even though they might not play a lot, that in itself is signal.
Right.
Because the team is not playing that rookie.
Yeah.
But over time, right, you start to get feedback actually pretty quickly. In fact, you'll get feedback before the next draft.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the people that you've rated are going to get playing time, and then some of those people aren't going to play at all. And that has signal as well. So it's actually a relatively fast feedback loop where you can start to close this over a pretty large data set. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you can make these ratings about a lot of different people. But here's the interesting thing. So that's going to help you on the go forward, because you're going to start to be able to create a map of like, ooh, I'm a really good detector of this signal, but maybe not so good a judge of this signal. You're going to start to improve. You're going to start to understand like, what are other people seeing that I may not? Like, what is the AI seeing, for example, if you have them in the decision process that I'm not? That's great. But this is the interesting thing. The fact that you know that process is going to happen is going to improve your decision making in the first place.
Yeah.
So there's a really big difference between making a decision where you actually just don't think anybody's going to go back and check. And it's not like you're trying to get away with it. Well, nobody's going to check, so I'm just going to make a bad decision. It's just, you're clearly not. Like, obviously you want to do well. It's that knowing that this is actually going to occur helps you get into a better place of accuracy in the moment. That accountability actually just really matters for boosting your accuracy in the moment that you make the decision. So even if this is the first time you ever do the process, the fact that you're having to quantify it, that it's public, that you know that people are going to look at it, that they're going to look at it later, actually starts to discipline your decisions, and your decisions will become less biased because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Again, the talking about all those aspects when it comes to, again, what we would call our traditionally successful drafting NFL teams. And it becomes, again, kind of the philosophy. Again, the Ravens are one, the Green Bay model that has been passed down no matter who the GM is Seattle has it with their GM who's been there a while. And of course, Les has been in LA long enough where, again, he's kind of passed it down. And it's the challenge that so many GMs, as they come from one of these spots, hey, I'm going to make it somewhat my own. So they start tweaking that process a little bit, making it their own. And what things you hear things like, oh, we're trying not to be too rigid with our scouts. We want them to, again, insert some of their personality into it, which, again, back to your point, and the facial expression is perfect. As soon as you get into that, again, not only does it make hard to evaluate your process, but again, something that I think is sorely lacking in the NFL is then evaluating your evaluators. Because again, right, if you are within that same framework, not only can we evaluate the players and what's happened in the draft, but you can go back and talk to your 8 or 10 scouts and be like, hey, you were really good in this area. But again, you were just all over the place here. And then again, we'll allow teams to, hey, we're going to improve the process for you. We're going to invest in you as an evaluator, which again goes back to the process. If you improve that person in the process. It's not something to be
scared of, right? Like, okay, first of all, the process that I'm describing includes your personality because you have to make a judgment of all of these things, right? So having made those judgments, you may make a forecast of, on average, how many games per season do you think the player is going to be eligible for, right? Which is a judgment based on whatever the physicians say about what their injury proneness might be or whatever. Like that's a judgment you're going to make. So first of all, that's your judgment. You own that, right? Just because you're writing down an actual forecast or you're saying there are 6 in this category in speed or whatever, that's still you. Separately, when we talk about these very big judgments that you have to make, right? Like, so if we go back to the venture model, let's imagine we're judging market. I make these 7 judgments about market that it's really just defining it. It's informing what's my definition of this. And I'm just, rating those on, say, a scale of 0 to 7. When I give my final judgment about market, this broader category, and I say 0 to 7, anybody that I work with now gives me 3 to 5 sentences as to why they're giving that judgment. That's personality. That's great.
There you go.
And it's informative, right? Yeah. Like I want to know, like, I don't want to just know that you gave it a 6. I want to know why.
Right.
And now you can tell me why. And then I can look at the why. And that why is going to be informed by all the things that make up market. Like, well, I was thinking about the competitive landscape. Was the market growing? Like those kinds of things. But it's now all disciplined to this thing that we've agreed on, right? Like, here's this structure to the way that we think through these problems. This is what we've agreed to. And your personality is automatically reflected in that because it's you that are giving the judgments. I would add one thing, Neil, to what you said about like, are there, these 2 things, right? Like the structured, rigorous decision-making and then like the closing of the feedback loops. The third thing I would just add to that is that you have to elicit these judgments independently. I never want to throw a bunch of scouts in a room and let them start randomly talking about players. What a disaster, right? Like you have to have these structured feedback forms, have them do that independently, and then come into a room. And this is a different place that I think AI now becomes like extra helpful is, let's imagine you have the scouts. They've now filled out their feedback, right? These quantified opinions with their sort of 3 to 5 sentence rationales for their judgments. And they've all done it independently of each other. It means I don't know that I disagreed with any of you, right? The LLM can now actually integrate that for you and say, here are the areas of the greatest disagreement, and have that, you should be talking about these areas because you disagree the most on these. And here are general themes that we're coming across in these sort of rationales, right? So here are the general themes about the players. And LLMs are awesome at that, by the way. Just like integrating the feedback. So I would just add, Neil, independence, right? Like this independence of that initial feedback, I think is really important. I think that almost nobody does it. And it's a shame because I think that might be the biggest thing that would increase accuracy.
I think that is a big takeaway, Annie, and that is a critical thing that most teams are not doing. I think Rodrik and I mean, I've never been in a war room myself, but if everyone else likes someone, it's a lot harder not to like them.
Yep.
And
That's
that's
right.
just human nature, you know. But I
Yeah.
guess if teams are going to really be effective and take the next step, they're going to have to get used to being uncomfortable and willing to segregate those opinions out some way. And that's very helpful to know. Makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
and it turns out it's not as uncomfortable as you think, because I think that when we imagine that disagreement, we think about us sort of standing out from the crowd and disagreeing with the crowd. But when you actually elicit the feedback independently, it turns out everybody's kind of disagreeing with each other. And so then you realize, oh no, this is normal.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, like, why do you have a bunch of scouts anyway?
Right.
Right? Like, if you needed everybody to agree with each other, you would have one. But you have a bunch because you'd like them to disagree. I actually do, and this is something that, like, I would recommend anybody do. You can find that Michael Mobison and his son Andrew, I think that they have this online where you can do it. So you can download the exercise. But I have this list of 20 words that describe probability, but using like just a natural language term. So it's things like real possibility, or highly likely, or certainly, those kinds of words. So there's like 20 of these words. And I have people, I basically hand the sheet out with these 20 words, like, real possibility and whatever on them. And I'm sure that just think for a second, right? How often in conversation are you using things like, yeah, I think that's really likely, right?
Yeah.
And I bet you, when you say those things, you think that you and the other person understand each other. And this is part of the problem with just sort of having unstructured discussions, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I give them these terms, and I have them each. I say, I'm giving you this form for each of these words. I want you to say what probability you're intending when you say that word. So in other words, if you say something like, I think that's a real possibility, and you imagined 100 tries, how many out of 100 times would that thing occur that you're saying is a real possibility? All right. So they do this for all the words, right? And now I say, okay, find two people who are like sitting next to you and copy their answers down next to yours. And immediately they start doing this, and just laughter occurs because they can't even believe, right? They're like, what? How could you possibly think that means that? So what you find is that with a term like real possibility, you usually get a spread like of about 20% to 80%, which is, I mean, just think about what a huge disagreement you're having and you don't even know, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
kind of crazy. But here's the really interesting thing. Always and never, people don't agree on what those mean. They
Yeah.
do not agree on what those mean.
Yeah.
It's like some people think it always means 95%. I happen to be 100%er. That's what, when I say always, I mean always. But
100%.
yeah, but there's lots of I'm telling you, there's a lot of people who think that means 95%.
Yeah.
Same thing with never. They think it means 5%.
So never is zero.
I think this is a really important exercise because, we then talk about it, and what they intuit right away is that if they had just worked together on the sheet, they would have never known how much they disagreed with each other about what these terms mean, right? That's number one. And that kind of gives them an understanding of the importance of sort of getting this feedback independently. But it also tells them, oh, we actually do have to be really precise about what we're saying. Instead of just saying, hey, I think they're a great prospect, we have to say, okay, on a scale of 0 to 7, like what do you mean? Are they a 7? Are they a 6? Are they a 5? What are they? Because if you just say something like real possibility, like, I don't really know what that means. Like, you've got to tell me you think it's 70%.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that it sort of has a lot of lessons in there for great decision making. Like I say, if you search Andrew and Michael Mobison, I think that you can find it online if anybody wants to do that with their team, because I think it's very informative.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, that's really, my wife probably gets mad at me because she'll ask me how something was, and I will give her my scouting trait grade scale a sufficient is 5. That is above average. I know exactly where that at. It's not good, but it's above average. And she's like, can you just tell me, like, if I told you exactly where it's at. And it is a very specific thing for me. And again, my simple scouting mind goes in that way. And again, that's the way it works for me. And again, to your point, it clarifies everything, which again, clarity in decision making is good. So Annie, as we wrap up here, again, I could keep talking to you because again, this stuff fascinates me. And again, hopefully the listeners have gotten to this point with us. But again, we help a lot of aspiring scouts. There's a lot of scouts, a lot of front office people that listen. As you are helping businesses and individuals in that regard make decisions. You're part of something called the Alliance for Decision Education. If somebody is wanting to, again, improve their decision making, whether it's, from a corporate standpoint, leadership standpoint, or I am going to be more consistent in my decisions to improve my outcomes, talk about that alliance. And would it be something, are there tools, a spot that you would recommend people go to check out and kind of learn more about it?
Yeah. So let me just separate kind of the two things. So in terms of adults and improving decision-making, there's a couple of things that I would recommend. My books, obviously, but there's some other great books. There's a book called Super Forecasting by Phil Tetlock, which I think is fantastic. There's a great book by Michael Mauboussin, who I already mentioned, called The Success Equation, which is incredible. It's about in disentangling luck and skill, and lots of sports examples. So specifically for this audience, I think that would be a great book. A variety of other books that are like just fantastic. I teach a course on maven.com that people can sign up for. And it's a 3-week course. We meet twice a week with 1 office hour. And it's really walking through and teaching people really, sort of what's this problem of decision making in terms of uncertainty, and then walking people through like what does a good decision process look like, and really teaching them that. So that, and then like listen to podcasts like this. The Alliance for Decision Education, I'm incredibly passionate about. I co-founded it with my husband. We're trying to bring these lessons, the kinds of things that we've been talking about, to kids, right? So there's been all this work that's been done on improving decision-making with adults, both the science of doing this, in academics, in terms of like, what are the kinds of tools that can help us understand both where decision-making goes wrong and how we can make it right. And then bringing that into adults, whether it's in the sports world or the corporate world. I've worked across, I've done work with NFL teams before, businesses, so on and so forth, right? That's great. But gosh, why aren't we teaching this in K through 12, right? If you think about it, there's only 2 things that determine how someone's life turns out, right? Luck. Like I was born to the certain parents I were at the certain time, and the United States, so on and so forth, right? Like if I'd been born 400 years ago, the possibilities for my life would have been really different. I didn't have any control over that. I don't have control over how tall I am, right? Like things like that, right? Like, so there's luck, and then there's the quality of your decisions.
Right.
That's it. Those are the 2 things.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we teaching kids like trigonometry? Why aren't we teaching them how to make great decisions? And we know so much about it because we know how to do it with adults. So what we do at the Alliance is we're a field builder, meaning we don't just like create curricula that you can download to teach the kids, but we do a lot of advocacy, lobbying, trying to get state, school, boards of ed to start to include decision education in K through 12. We have a research department. We do. We have $12.5 million in restricted funds for research grants to start creating proven interventions with kids that will improve their decision making, to try to figure out how to evaluate efficacy, so on and so forth. And then we're really trying to accelerate other organizations that are in the same space, trying to improve decision making. We've done fantasy football as a tool for teaching decision making to high schoolers. Right now, we do a forecasting competition, which of course is very much part of your world, with high schoolers, because it's a big part of decision making, becoming a great forecaster. And so we're really looking at, like, from the earliest ages, what are the things that you can teach like a kindergartner? What are the things that you can start to teach in middle school? What can you teach in high school to prepare kids for the world that they're actually going to enter into?
Yeah.
Right. Which is a
Yeah.
very complex informational space where
Yeah.
your decisions really are what you have, and it's what matters the
Yeah.
most for how your life turns
Yeah.
out, separate from the luck component.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's perfect. I've got a 5 and a 3-year-old, and while you're teaching them right and wrong, the phrase I always use is make good decisions. And
Yeah.
again, it's, for my 3-year-old little man who's wild and out of control sometimes, hey buddy, you got to make good decisions. And again, there's an outcome, but again, making that right decision because it is big, and educating them on that is big. So that's perfect. Well, we got to wrap up. We've kept you over an hour. Your website, your books, everything is up at annieduke.com. We will look forward to the next book coming out. I am sure it's going to be a good one. We will hopefully get some fantastic feedback, and hopefully people can come find you, reach you out. So Annie, we really appreciate you being on with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's a fun topic for me to talk about, particularly as it relates to sports. I don't get to talk about that much.
Awesome. Well, we are happy to have you, and we thank you. Agents, before we go, make sure you go check out Agent Live 360. It is at agentlive360.com for everything you need for your agency, from players to coaches, managing profiles, tracking invoices, sending invoices, getting paid, keeping up on every element of your entire agency. Notification emails, file folder storage, ROI, transactions, invoices, calendar, contracts, teams, reps, everything all in one spot for you. That is Agent Live 360. Hop on, request a demo. Yours truly will hop on, walk you through it. I can promise you we will talk some football as well. Sign up now with code TRIAL90 for a 90-day, 3-month trial at just $10 a month for Agent Live 360. That's at agentlive360.com. Go check it out now.